Hello.
Hi, how are you? Good. I
Thank
don't
God.
see you, but I hear your voice.
Here,
Okay,
I keep it covered. There we go.
okay,
Let me
good.
see. There.
So Parshas Tetzaveh, the Ata Tetzaveh. Now, this is the only parsha since Bereshis that has no mention of the name Moshe Rabbeinu. And the Vilna Gaon was of the opinion that the reason for this is because Parshas Tetzaveh almost always overlaps with Zion, the 7th of Adar, which is the anniversary of the death of Moshe Rabbeinu. And we're left a little bit hanging in the air because we don't see any conceptual connection between Parshas Tetzaveh and the omission of Moshe Rabbeinu's name, other than the fact that in most occasions, although it's not always so, that during the week of Parshas Tetzaveh, we have Zion Adar, the anniversary of Moshe's death. Is there perhaps a deeper meaning and a connection between Parshas Tetzaveh and the omission of Moshe's name? In Parshas Tetzaveh, we have a very, very important pasuk. Let's take a look in Perek Chav Ches, which is the Perek that we're about to start, pasuk Aleph. V'ata hakrei v'lecha es Aaron achicha v'es banav mitoch such lechano li. Lechano li means that you, Aaron, will be the Kohen Gadol. And this is a critical turning point in the career of Moshe Rabbeinu. Actually, the best candidate for Kohen Gadol, for the job of the high priest, would have been Moshe Rabbeinu. After all, he was the leader that took the people out of Mitzrayim, redeemed them from slavery. He gave them the Torah. He was the Moshiach Shal Yisrael, the Redeemer of Israel. And wouldn't it make sense, given his intellectual capabilities, the fact that he knew the entire Torah and transmitted it? No one was responsible for the Torah other than Moshe Rabbeinu. Would it make sense that he would have the office of the Kohen Gadol? But the answer lies in Rashi, back in Parshas Shmos. In the mice of the snare, Moshe Rabbeinu stood for a week debating with Hashem about taking the job of being the Redeemer of Israel, and back and forth, arguments. At one point, Hashem said to Moshe Rabbeinu, you know what? If you can't speak, I put speech into the mouth of man. And if necessary, I'll send Aaron along with you to go to Paro, and he'll be your voice. He'll speak on your behalf. And yet, even after Hashem had completely rejected Moshe Rabbeinu's arguments and contended that Moshe was the perfect choice for this job, Moshe still said, Shlachna b'yad tishlach. Send someone else. And then the pasuk says, Vayichar af Hashem b'Moshe. At that point, I guess we could say proverbially, God was fed up with Moshe Rabbeinu. How could it be that time after time, he refused to take that job? And even after Hashem guaranteed him that he would have Aaron on his side. And it's very interesting that Rashi tells us that there was a great Tana who asked the question as to where is the Charon Af? It says here that Hashem was angry. There was divine wrath at Moshe for refusing time after time to take the job. So the pasuk testifies that God was angry. And all over Tanakh, whenever we see anger on the part of the Creator, we always follow with a punishment. Here, we don't see that Moshe Rabbeinu was punished. Fantastic question. And the answer that's given is that Moshe Rabbeinu was in fact punished. And the Kahuna Gedola, the high priesthood, was taken away from Moshe Rabbeinu, and it was transferred over to his brother Aaron. So Moshe was the most appropriate choice, the best candidate for the job of Kohen Gadol. And in the original divine plan, indeed, he was singled out to be the Kohen Gadol, but it changed. And that job, the priesthood, was transferred over to Aaron. And if that be the case, we have a deeper understanding of why this Parsha, Parshas Tetzaveh, omits the name of Moshe Rabbeinu. Instead, it tells us, V'ata krei lecha es Aaron achicha l'chanoli. Aaron will be the Kohen Gadol. We don't know that until this Parsha. This is the pasuk that testifies to the divine decree, that decision to transfer the Kahuna Gedolah from Moshe onto the shoulders of Aaron. It's right here written in the Parsha. And this is Tetzaveh. So that Hashem in Tetzaveh inscribes in the book of books the decree of Hashem that resulted from the Vayichar Af at the beginning of Sefer Shmos at the Sneh. And now, at this point, Moshe Rabbeinu's name will not appear because he will not achieve his full fruition, his total mission in life. There'll be something lacking. And that lacking, which is a result of Moshe's refusal to accept the mission of the Almighty and to redeem Israel and to free the nation of Israel, that is what's going on in the absence of Moshe Rabbeinu's name. Because the Torah tells us that Vayichar Af, and immediately afterwards, we'll open up the pasuk so we see it inside. It's in Perek Daled of Sefer Shmos. I always point this out, that it's good to see the pasuk inside. Let's open up to Perek Daled, pasuk Yudaled. Let's see if I got it right. Vayichar Af Hashem b'Moshe, Vayomer halo Aaron achicha halevi yodati ki daber yedaber hu, etc., etc. Why does the pasuk add halevi? We know that Moshe and Aaron were both b'nei Levi. The pasuk goes out of its way to identify Aaron as the Levi. Says Rashi, Vayichar Af, Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha Omer, Kol Charon Af Shebatorah Nemer Bo Roshem. Some punishment results from the Charon Af. Is there, but in this case, God gets angry at Moshe. Bo Nemer Bo Roshem, Lo Metzinu Sheba Onesh, Al Yideo So Charon. We don't find any punishment in the wake of that anger. Omalo Rabbi Yossi says to Rabbi Yeshua ben Karcha, you're making a mistake. Af Bazu Nemar Bo Roshem. Hello, Aaron al Achicha Levi. Al Levi. What's mean Al Levi? And the answer is, says Rabbi Yossi, Shoya Asid Leos Levi. He was meant to serve in the capacity in the Beis HaMikdash, in the Mishkan, in the function of a Levi. That's what he was meant to do. But HaKahuna Ha'isi Omer Lotzeis Mimcha Me'ata Lo Yeh Ken Ela Hu Yeh Kohen V'ata Levi. Beautiful Rashi. In the name of Rabbi Yossi, that now Hashem identifies Aaron as the one who should have been the Levi, and that was his main function in the original divine plan. And now you, Moshe Rabbeinu, will take over to be the Levi, but Aaron will be the Kohen Gadol. And this is the sad story that Chazal say the Charon Af took its toll upon Moshe Rabbeinu, and he could not serve as the Kohen Gadol. This was a job and a position, a status that was given instead, transferred to Aaron. Now let's understand this on a deeper level. What would have been if the original divine plan had come to fruition? If Moshe had not incurred the wrath, the divine wrath, and instead he would have been appointed, which was the original plan, the intention of the Ribono Shel Olam in the scheme of things, that Moshe would serve as the Kohen Gadol. And the answer, I believe, is posh, but very fundamental and very far-reaching. Moshe Rabbeinu would have been the Kohen Gadol. The Beis Hamikdash would have been established in Yerushalayim, and that would be it. There would never, ever have been a Churban. The entire Churban happened as a result of the fact that Moshe Rabbeinu would not play the role and function as the Kohen Gadol had Moshe Rabbeinu not initially refused the leadership of Israel, had he not rejected that role and had the Yetzias Mitzrayim, the redemption, taken place. It would have been a Yetzias Mitzrayim with Moshe Rabbeinu at the helm of Kohen Gadol, of the Kahuna Gedola. It would have been a permanent establishment of the Beis Hamikdash, not a temporary. Instead, the Geula, the redemption, was temporary. And eventually the Beis Hamikdash will be destroyed. And the Kahuna Gedola would no longer be operative. Imagine what it would have been like had Moshe Rabbeinu been chosen and appointed as the Kohen Gadol on a permanent basis. And this is why I believe the Parsha omits the name of Moshe Rabbeinu. And it's true that, as the Gaon points out, this Parsha generally coincides with the 7th of Adar. But there's a more profound reason why Moshe Rabbeinu's name was omitted from this parsha. The Geula of Mitzrayim did not result in the permanent redemption of the Jewish people. Moshe would die before he enters into Eretz Yisrael, and all of this is because of that Charonaf, when Moshe refused the mantle of leadership to be the Redeemer of Israel. He would have been the Kohen Gadol, and the Beis Hamikdash would be permanent, and there never would have been a Churban. Moving on, the Torah says, the Asisa Bigdei Kodesh. This is Pasuk Beis in chapter Chavches. And it says that these Bigdei Kodesh will be li Aaron, for your brother Aaron, the kavod ulisif aris, for honor and glory. I would like to take a little time to discuss this concept of begadim, of garments, of clothing that we wear. And we know that the ordinary people, like you and I, we wear the suits, the ties, the dresses, whatever we have to wear, and that's it. But there are certain specific people who wear uniforms. Their outfits are indicative of their special status, of their high dignity and role that they play in society. A special dress, a special garment, a uniform that indicates that this person is very special. He wears a uniform. A king will wear the kingly garments and a crown on his head. The queen will wear her garments, and etc., etc. Police force and leaders, they will all be dressed in a very special way. These are governmental officials. They've been appointed by the public, and they always wear uniforms. What is the deeper meaning of the uniform? What message can we take from this concept of a uniform and see how it applies to Bigdei Kahuna, the special garments and the outfit that was worn by the Kohen? Obviously, and this is on a simple level, we don't have to go deeper in order to appreciate that the uniform indicates that you're endowed with authority. You have been appointed to hold office. And therefore, you distinguish yourself from the rest of the people in society. Even a totalitarian monarch, an absolute monarch, would wear special garments to distinguish himself from the average citizen in his country. So with leadership, and distinction comes distinctive garments, the special dignity of a unique, dignified man who is authorized within and selected in society. The Kohen Gadol would wear special garments. The Kohanim would wear the Big Day Kuda that we're going to learn about. What were the garments of Moshe Rabbeinu? We don't know that Moshe Rabbeinu would wear special garments. And it seems peculiar that on the one hand, Aaron Ubanov are going to wear special garments, the Kohen Gadol, and Moshe Rabbeinu, the leader of Klal Yisrael, is not going to be distinguished in his dress, at least not according to the Torah's mandate as we learn it. So let's talk a little bit about kavod, about dignity. Dignity is something that is not necessarily gained or achieved by education, by training. Dignity is something that you cannot create on your own. You can't create your own dignity. A king, for example, any sort of leader or ruler is going to be appointed or elected, and in order that his special status and dignity should not go unnoticed, he wears begadim. But those begadim, that clothing, that outfit, is an expression not of his own intellect, not of his own abilities. It's the dignity of a man who wears a uniform because he is special amongst the people. He has certain privileges. He has certain responsibilities. And certainly he has certain authority. This is the garments that express on the outside, klape chutz, as we would say in public, the distinct role, authority, etc., of this person. And the truth is that from a pure Jewish philosophical, moral perspective, that's really not what kavod is all about. Kavod is a result of humility. And Chazal always say that he who runs away from kavod because of his humility, kavod will run after him. When a person dons these special uniforms, in a sense, he builds himself up, his status. It's like, do you remember in American universities, if you achieved the goals, they would give you a Phi Beta Kappa, it would dangle. These are the special uniforms that are granted to a person who holds office or has a special status and is given some privileges. But again, it all comes from the outside. It's being granted to him, and it's being like anointed on the king, on his head by the outside, by the people. And not only that, these garments will remind the person who wears them of his special responsibility. So when the regular Kohen is wearing Big Day Kahuna, he understands which avodah he has to do and the responsibility. The Kohen Gadol wears his uniform, as it says here in our Pasuk, Yasisa Big Day Kodesh Li'aron Achicha Lekavod Ulesefares, for dignity. But it's again coming from the outside. Because it's almost as if a person like a king, if he does not don royal garments, he doesn't have the authority to act as a king. And the same thing is true of a Kohen or a Kohen Gadol. Without his garments, he doesn't have the authority and the responsibility to do the avodah. But Moshe Rabbeinu is a different story. Moshe Rabbeinu had no special garments, even though he held a position of leadership. And I believe the reason for that is hidden in a pasuk in Sefer Bamidbar, Lochein Moshe Avdu. Neman Basi. He's faithful throughout my house, throughout my community. God says that Moshe Rabbeinu himself, in his very essence, has earned his greatness. It's not bestowed from the outside, externally. When garments are given to a person because of his authority, they are granted to him and bestowed upon him as special vestments because of his position. But Moshe Rabbeinu is beloved to the people. Moshe Rabbeinu is great in and of himself. He's the teacher of Torah. You don't have to bestow on Moshe Rabbeinu authority. There was no act of bestowing authority. Moshe Rabbeinu never wore special garments or uniforms. It all came from his personal growth, his greatness. And therefore, he didn't have to wear any special garments. Let's just review the two ideas. I think they're both mind-boggling and very fundamental. Number one, we spoke about Moshe Rabbeinu forfeiting the role of Kohen Gadol, which was instead transferred over to Aaron. Had only Moshe Rabbeinu served as Kohen Gadol, had he been appointed, as it were, in the original divine plan, it would have been a geula of permanence, not a temporary geula. And that's why Moshe Rabbeinu's name is omitted from Parshas Tetzaveh, because in this parsha, Moshe Rabbeinu is called upon to anoint and appoint Aaron as the Kohen Gadol. And Moshe Rabbeinu just lost, again, we discussed earlier why he lost it, but he lost that role, and therefore his name is omitted from this parsha. Secondly, what we discussed is that the Big Day Kahuna, like all begotten, like all uniforms, like all special vestments and ornamental garments, are indicative of the appointment of a person from the outside when he is granted privileges and authority. And that's all mi bachutz klape pnim. It goes in the direction of from the outside to the inside. Not in Moshe Rabbeinu's case. His greatness comes from within, and therefore he doesn't have to wear any special garments. I'd like to talk to you about Pasuk Vav, but really just the first three words in Pasuk Vav, the Asu Es HaEphod. The ephod is one of the Big Day Kahuna, and the Rashi says, I never heard or learned exactly how to design the ephod. What is it? What is the design of the ephod? But Libi Omerli, says Rashi, my heart tells me that it is belted around the back. And Rashi continues to describe the ephod as he believed the ephod would be designed. But Rashi has no proof. He cannot provide any proof. He just gives us a detailed picture based on his intuition. How could that be? How is it possible that Big Day Kahuna, in this case the ephod, which is so critical, would not be described by the Torah? Okay, that's question number one. There are no details in the Torah, but more profoundly, how could Rashi tell us, I'll tell you, I'll reveal to you the vision of the ephod, because Libi Omerli, because this is what my heart teaches me. I want to share with you an insight into Avos, and specifically what's called Avos de Rabbi Nassan. In the later chapters, it says that Bnei Yisrael were nichteru b'shlosha ksarim. They were crowned with 3 crowns. Keser Malchus, Keser Kahuna, and Keser Torah. What does that mean, Kesed Torah? Often I thought, or shall I say, I suggested to myself that Kesed Torah is an intellectual achievement, but I don't believe so at all. I believe that Kesed Torah, which again is not a physical crown, it's just a manifestation of something deeper. Kesed Torah reflects or expresses the transformation of the personality, the sanctification and purification of the Torah scholar, of he who is dedicated to the study of Torah. Not like other mitzvahs. Torah is Kiddush HaGavra. It sanctifies the individual who is preoccupied with the study of Torah. He's not the same person that he was before he studied Torah. He's a new person, sanctified, as it were, by the Kiddush of Torah. And hence, all the dinim that we have to give kavod to a Talmid Chacham, it's all based on the fact that the Talmid Chacham has Kesed Torah. And that's not just knowledge. It means to be elevated, to be spiritually purified with a personal purification. That's Kesed Torah. It means that a student, a scholar of Torah, has been endowed with a certain special sensitivity, a certain worldview that transforms him into a different personality. This is Kesed Torah. Now, I want to tell you something. I'm going to tell you a story about Reb Chaim, but it's true about so many Gedolei Yisrael. When a Shaila was asked to Reb Chaim, he immediately knew the answer, even before he could figure it out. Reb Chaim intuited which direction he wanted to go. He saw a vague destination where he would ultimately get to. And the Chassam Sofer was the same. They say about the Chassam Sofer that immediately after the question was raised, he gave the answer. And then he would work it out why that answer is correct. It's a form of Ruach HaKodesh. And I believe that that's what we're seeing here in Rashi with regard to the ephod. Libi Omer, when the personality is transformed and it becomes identified with the Torah and with the sanctity of the Torah, at that point, it's a different leg. It's a different heart. It's a different intuition. The intuition is the intuition of Torah that is now personified and embodied in the personality of the Talmid Chacham. And that's what Kesed Torah is all about. And so Reb Chaim used to say that initially, even before he would formulate his ideas and he would resolve the issue, he knew intuitively exactly which approach he would take. He had that sensitivity, that perception. His neshama was nishmas HaTorah. He was one with the Torah. And therefore, he could understand by intuition the underlying message or method of a sugya. He would look beyond the simple words on the page to uncover the treasure that lies hidden beneath the externalities of the page. And anyone around him could feel the light and perceive that Reb Chaim was working instinctively in order to down a certain direction. And if that be the case, if a person who's endowed with Kesed Torah is able to gain a special intuition as a result of his special sanctity, his intimacy with the Torah, then I begin to understand Rashi when Rashi says, Libi Omer, because Rashi, his leiv, his moach, his very soul is one with the Torah. And if you're one with the Torah, then you know the truth intuitively, even if on an intellectual level you're not yet ready for what's called Chachma Bina V'das, for Chabad, to analyze it. You're not ready. It's too premature. But instinctively, you know where you're going. Where is the light at the end of the tunnel? And you can anticipate the answer to a halachic question intuitively with this sixth sense, almost Ruach HaKodesh, even before you've analyzed the question and put them under the lab conditions, the electric micros telescope, or I shouldn't say telescope, before you investigate it, you already know the answer intuitively.
Microscope.
Thank you, Chaim. And that's the Rashi of Libi Omerli. When you're absolutely dedicated, absorbed to the inner holiness of the Torah, and your neshama becomes one with the Torah, your heart is a lave that's lave Torah. The seichel of a Torah is the seichel alev. And when that happens, then Libi Omerli, the lave that is one and identified with Torah, can answer any question. Can know where the Torah is taking us, down which path. Such is the greatness of the lave of a Rashi, the lave of Reb Chaim, the lave of Chassam Sofer, etc., etc. And now we get to the, the tough part of the Shir, and that's the Choshen Mishpat. And if we look here in Perek Chav Ches at Pasuk Tesvav, so at 28:15, V'asisa Choshen Mishpat, Maisa Choshev, Ke Maisa Efod Ta'aseder, etc., etc. Choshen Mishpat. We have to understand that with regard to what the Kohen Gadol wore, there were two items that demand special attention. One of them is called the tzitz. Oh, excuse me. They're telling me that I should put this battery thing in. Okay. Good idea. Okay. What